Good morning, everybody, and good evening in Johannesburg, which is where I flew in from a couple days ago. I'm Chris Bradford. I'm one of the founders of African Leadership Academy. I'd also like to think that I can please both Ralph Nader and Neil Ferguson, because after being a Siebel Scholar, I built a boarding school, but that boarding school is designed to build the human capital stock of the African continent and really identify and develop promising leaders. I also, before I continue, want to say a giant thank you. A thank you on behalf of all of my colleagues and our students at African Leadership Academy to the Siebel Scholars community. It is deeply humbling to be a winner of the inaugural Siebel Scholars Impact Award. And I want to thank Tom and the Siebel Scholars Foundation and all the Siebel Scholars who have enabled this amazing investment in our work at ALA. And so what is ALA and why do we do this? I think it should start by me talking a little bit about what I'm really passionate about and what I really am interested in. See, I believe that educational institutions shape societies over long periods of time. And they do so not just because they impart knowledge, though that is important. They do so because they build sustained networks of individuals who work together for long periods of time with shared culture and values. Sustained networks with shared culture and values. These networks enable the exchange of intellectual, human, social, financial capital. And many of us have experienced this. I certainly have. My first two jobs were enabled as a result of an alumnus who I met on campus when I was an undergraduate. We need to build powerful educational institutions that work across the African continent, which don't currently exist today, that will build these types of networks for Africa. And so in 2005, when I graduated from Stanford, I began work with a classmate from Ghana to build an educational institution that would begin to transform Africa. And we started with a simple premise. We said, if we can identify, develop, and connect young leaders and bring them together in an educational institution that has a powerful culture about entrepreneurial leadership in Africa, then we can begin to create sustained change. And we believe this because we believe transformative impact historically follows a common formula. And Bill Gates is an instructive example of this formula, right? Where you have someone with immense potential. Bill Gates, bright guy, 1590 on his SATs apparently, right? But then he practices a craft. And there's this amazing research into deliberate practice. So thousands of hours of sustained deliberate practice over long periods of time. And there's this important catalytic factor, however, that enables impact, and that's opportunity. Bill Gates had the opportunity to go to Lakeside High School, one of the top schools in Seattle, Washington, which at the time was possibly the only school in America with a computing club. Bill Gates had hours and hours and hours of practice on computers and programming before he went to university. That put him in the position, that opportunity to be at Lakeside and be in that club, put him in the position to become Bill Gates. Every day in Africa, thousands of young people are born with Bill Gates-like potential in one field or another. Our job is to identify and to nurture them. And so what do we do at African Leadership Academy? We every year go all over the African continent to identify the most promising young leaders regardless of their socioeconomic background. This year we had 3,000 young leaders nominated in 46 countries, and we selected 100 to enter our 5th class. We then bring them together where they practice. They both develop the intellectual growth that they need in order to succeed at university, but they also practice leadership, and every young leader builds a business or a social venture during their time at ALA. And then we connect them, importantly, to opportunities. Many of those opportunities are, in fact, people. They're people like you who end up enabling them to take the next step, the next leap, and create this inflection point in their lives. I often say that the best way to learn about ALA is not hearing from someone like me or my partner, Fred, but hearing from one of our students. And so I'd like to invite Paul, who's an ALA graduate, to the stage to share a little bit about his experience, and then we can close and have Q&A.
As Chris said, I'm Paul Lorem. I was born in a village in South Sudan, which is pictured here. In 1996, war forced my family and me across the border to a desolate refugee camp in northern Kenya, which is about 100 miles from Kenya-South Sudan border. I was about 6 years old, and I had been sick from tuberculosis, TB, for 2 years. My parents' disappointment with our new home commenced right away. They both hated the life as refugees, and they wanted to return back to our village. But they hung on for a while to see me through my tuberculosis medication. I got admitted to a hospital in the refugee camp, and after 6 months, I was cured. After that, my parents returned to our village, where they eventually both passed on. So this is a picture of Kakuma Refugee Camp. And this is where I would live for the next 11 years of my life. Many people see Kakuma the way my parents did, a desolate and difficult place to live in. But for me, it ended up being an environment with an enabling opportunities through the people I met and their network. My parents left me under the custody of a 15-year-old young uncle. And after that, we joined a group of South Sudanese unaccompanied minors, where they're popularly known as the Lost Boys of Sudan, where we lived in groups of 12. In 1997, my young uncle took me to enroll in one of the makeshift schools in the camp that was supported by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. School used to start at 8 in the morning and ended at 12, so it's about 4 hours of school every day. My uncle really loved school, and so every day he would ask me what I had learned in school. This forced me to pay attention in school and eventually made me so curious about just to escape the grilling when I get back to my place. And as a result, I started doing really well in school, which enabled me to connect with a second important person, my science teacher, who was from Ethiopia. He introduced me to the only library in the camp, which is pictured here, that was located in the Ethiopian section of the camp. And it was due to the frequent visits to the library that my English improved. I hope that the way I speak can testify to that. In 5th grade, my English teacher was a fellow Sudanese, and he took deep interest in me because I was really good in English dictation, and my spoken English then was far better than a lot of kids in my grade. And as such, he recommended me to a program called Children of South Sudan, and the program used to take really promising South Sudanese kids from the refugee camps and support them in local boarding school that was supported by the government of Kenya. So in 2003, I was one of those lucky kids, and I was taken to boarding school for my 7th and 8th grade. And at the end of 8th grade, I performed really well at the Kenya National Examination that normally taken every year by every kid at the end of 8th grade. And hence, I was admitted to Alliance High School, which is arguably the best high school in Kenya. And I spent 3 years there, and after that I was admitted to African Leadership Academy in South Africa. And LA provided a wonderful opportunities for me to grow and make new connections. In fact, in 2009, ALA faculty helped me to return to South Sudan for the first time since my arrival in the camp. ALA also facilitated internship for me, first with Equity Bank Limited in Kenya, and then an internship this past summer in Juba, South Sudan. So that was my second time back home. And a guest speaker at ALA, her name is Melissa Stravasnik, who works at Genentech. I hope a lot of you know what Genentech is. And her partner, Bruce Powell, have become my mentors and host family here in the US. Today, I'm one of 5 LA students studying at Yale. At Yale, I've also made great connections that have led to wonderful opportunities. For instance, I met Nicholas Christoph, who featured me in one of his articles in the New York Times through my advisor. And as a result of the article, I've had a number of opportunities to share my stories at different occasions. And now I'm speaking to you here today, and I hope I'm getting at doing that. After Yale, I'm planning to go back to South Sudan and build businesses that will contribute to economic development of our country. I hope to do this with the help of the networks that I would have made along the way. What I find so interesting about this network is that they are not necessarily unrelated. They are coordinated by institutions such as schools and churches. Those institutional networks enable connections to be made. For me and my ALA friends, I hope these networks will enable us to contribute to the future of our continent. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Come back. So we'll move to questions in a moment. Before we do, if you just put that down. Before we do, just a couple quick thoughts. One, Paul's story is far from finished, and has a very bright future ahead. But hopefully, in this story, you see some elements of this model, right? The identification of potential, enabling practice, and catalytic opportunities. Second, I think Paul's story is particularly instructive with respect to the conference that we've just had over the last day, because this is a story of upward mobility, and what enables upward mobility. Upward mobility is enabled by education, but it's enabled by networks that are built around schools, they're built around civil society organizations, churches, et cetera. And I think that it's an instructive case. With that in mind, then, I think that it's important to think about this network that we're all a member of. And I'm very proud to be a member of this network. I'm grateful for the Siebel Foundation's investment in my education, for their investment in African Leadership Academy. But the truth is, I think the great impact of the Siebel Scholars Program will be what we decide to do together with this network, with a shared culture and values designed around the betterment of our society. That may include addressing issues of class or education in America. It may include addressing issues of development in Africa. And I hope some of you might be interested in engaging with people like Paul, because as I sat here and thought and heard the different stories of everybody over the last day, and different projects people are working on, what amazing things and what amazing opportunities for some young leaders in Africa to learn from. So we'll be handing out some cards to everyone in the audience. If you could complete them, and if you'd like to get engaged in the work that we do at ALA, it would be greatly appreciated. Any questions? There's some down here.
I think I have the mic, so I'm going to just start.
Sure.
And it works. Paul Artie, class of 2012, MIT Sloan. Can you tell us a little bit about actually how you go out there and identify talent? I mean, Africa is obviously a tough place to get around and camps and refugee camps and so on. So how do you actually go out there and identify this talent? And I'm assuming you bring them to South Africa to go through some sort of program. So if you could talk about what that program looks like.
Great.
A little bit.
So I'll talk about it in broad strokes, and we can discuss it later. It was a great breakfast conversation that we had yesterday about this. Broad strokes, we have a network of nominators. It includes ministries of education and schools, but also includes a range of non-government civil society organizations that work with youth. And we ask those nominators a simple question: do they know a young person that they believe has the potential to change the world? We get about 3,000 students nominated, and then we work over 6 months to shortlist that first to 400, and then really invest in getting to know that 400. Paul will remember finalist weekend in Nairobi in 2008, where we put people through a battery of different types of exercises. They do group problem solving, individuals problem solving, other things, and interview, take a test. Ultimately, what we've learned that we're looking for is we're looking for courage, we're looking for perseverance, we're looking for passion, and we're looking for shared values. And if we can find those things, then students come to ALA, to our 2-year program, and are immensely successful. What happens in the program? It looks a little bit like a boarding school in that we've got very, very intensive English and math. We've got a world-class science program. Actually, the Southern Africa Science Olympiad this year, 8 of the top 10 performers across physical sciences and biological sciences came from African Leadership Academy, including the winners in both subjects. So we've got a world-class faculty, but we have this explicit focus on Africa and on entrepreneurial leadership that runs through the curriculum, including the development of a project. It's important because that's how we establish our culture. Right? We want our students to leave and feel passionate about Africa, and if they leave viewing Africa as an entrepreneur would, seeing powerful white space, right, that they can create, right? Our graduates can work with you to create chains of schools, low-cost health clinics, large-scale manufacturing facilities, right? Small-scale power generation, all kinds of things. We want them to view Africa as an entrepreneur's paradise, which is how I view Africa as someone who's lived there now for 6 years. And hopefully that inspires them, as Paul said, to want to come back when they're done.
So I'm Ton, Stanford Bioengineering. So just have a question maybe to you, or maybe Paul, maybe better to answer this. So among your classmates, or among your friends who entered the academy, what kind of things that you're passionate about the moment you enter it? What kind of thing you want to be the moment you enter it? And how those kind of things change, throughout the time that you stay in the academy. For example, you might want to be like a doctor or a president or whatever the moment you enter, and how that thing change over time in the academy.
Oh, okay. I think we're short on time, but I'll try to answer that as briefly as I can. And as you correctly pointed that when you get into the academy, each of us have their own different passions, but what sort of bring us together is just ALA, the network or the framework at ALA that would enable us to sort of just make that dreams or passions to come true. And that is done through the networks of being given an opportunity to do an internship or shadow an entrepreneur or to shadow a doctor in a hospital, or if you are interested in business. I did an entire day of just shadowing an entrepreneur who is doing a business of renting out computer stuff and anything related to computing. So that's just how ALA gives us the opportunity to just see how you can make those passions and dreams come true. Yeah.
Yes.
My name is Rushi Sheth from Northwestern Kellogg. Paul, thank you again for sharing and being with us here today. I'm curious, you talked about going back to Sudan, and South Sudan is now a new country, independent, and I'm curious about what are your ambitions for your return to South Sudan, and what do you think is maybe one challenge that the new country is facing?
As I said earlier, I hope to go back to South Sudan and create a business that would help our country develop economically. And the challenge is, to be honest, South Sudan, to answer that question, I will paint you a picture of what South Sudan is. is a country, Sudan was initially colonized by the British, and then they left in 1956. And during their time in Sudan, the British only focusing on developing the northern part of it. So I come from the south where it was historically just marginalized. And so after independence, immediately just the people started fighting for independence by taking up arms against the government. And so during that period, which is spanned about 50 years, there was no education or any infrastructure whatsoever in South Sudan. And so when we had our independence last year, you find that the people who are leading the fight for independence, warlords who have no education whatsoever, now you are given, with the just war mentality, now you are giving them a country to lead, and they have no idea how that is going to happen. But at least with the help of the United Nations Development Program, they're bringing a lot of expatriates into the country just to help set up institutions. But I'm not sure how that is sustainable in the long run. But that's our biggest challenge. So we just don't have the requisite human capacity to develop. And we do have a lot of resources. But the only thing that we really lack as a country is just the human aspect of it. And that's what I hope.
Paul, I want to thank you and thanks Chris, and ongoing success to you with this program.